Why do you keep getting triggered by people who don't even matter? Why does one small insult, one moment of rejection, ruin your entire day? In this video, we're going to uncover a hidden truth. You're not reacting to the world. You're reacting to the parts of yourself you refuse to face. If you want to become unshakable, truly untouchable by the noise of others, this is the awakening you've been waiting for. Anger, irritation, and emotional disturbance are not reactions to reality. They are reflections of an internal landscape we often refuse to explore. Most people believe they get angry because of what others do to them. Someone disrespects them and they react. Someone insults them and they feel attacked. But this is only the surface. Beneath every emotional reaction is a psychological projection, and understanding this mechanism is the first step in transcending the influence others have over you. Projection is the unconscious act of attributing one's own dissound qualities, traits, emotions, or impulses onto someone else. This means that the things you dislike most about others often reveal the parts of yourself you have rejected, denied, or exiled to your unconscious mind. You see someone as arrogant, not because they truly are, but because there is a repressed arrogance within you. A desire for recognition, for power, for confidence, that you never allowed yourself to own. Instead of dealing with that hidden impulse internally, the psyche sends it outward, casting it onto someone else so you can fight it safely, outside yourself. This is the trap, the illusion that the enemy is outside when in truth, the enemy is a piece of you that you never made peace with. Every time you react with disproportionate anger, what you are really experiencing is your unconscious screaming for attention. The moment someone criticizes you and it deeply affects you, that's a sign. Something inside you already agrees with the criticism. If someone calls you a failure and you have no doubts about your path, their words slide off you. But if there's a hidden insecurity, a wound you've buried, that comment ignites fire, not because it's true, but because it touched something raw that you haven't healed. The ego resists this truth. It wants to believe in the innocence of victimhood. It wants to say, they made me angry, or they are toxic, instead of accepting the more painful but liberating realization, I am still fragmented within. Projection shields us from facing our darkness, but that same shield becomes a prison. As long as we believe others are responsible for our emotional state, we remain controlled by them. We become like puppets, our strings pulled by opinions, behaviors, and judgments that we falsely believe are personal attacks. To escape the projection trap, we must turn inward. This doesn't mean excusing toxic behavior or tolerating abuse. It means using every emotional trigger as a mirror, a signal that points to a deeper truth inside us. The external world becomes a diagnostic tool, not a battleground. When we notice anger, frustration, envy, or contempt arise, we no longer blame others. We inquire, we investigate, what part of me does this reflect? What desire or fear is being mirrored back to me? What am I not allowing myself to feel, to express, to integrate? This internal dialogue is difficult. It requires honesty, humility, and the willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But it is also the only path to freedom. The more we reclaim our projections, the more we pull back the energy we have scattered across the world. We no longer see enemies in others. We begin to see pieces of ourselves. We no longer need others to change for us to be at peace, because the war was never really with them. It was with the parts of us we were afraid to meet. In this process, we begin to experience a shift. What once angered us becomes a point of curiosity. What once triggered rage now invites reflection. The external world loses its power to disturb us, not because it has changed, but because we no longer depend on it to affirm or deny who we are. By understanding projection, we stop giving others the ability to dictate our emotional state. We take back the reins of our psyche. We stop being victims of our reactions and start becoming observers of our inner world, equipped with the awareness to transform every trigger into a lesson. The human mind is not a singular, unified force. It is a constellation of conflicting drives, instincts, thoughts, and identities, many of which remain outside the range of conscious awareness. Most people believe they are whole, rational beings who simply react to what life throws at them. But the truth is far more unsettling. We are divided internally, often torn between opposing psychological forces that remain unacknowledged. And it is this fragmentation that lies at the core of our anger and emotional reactivity. A person becomes angry not because someone else has caused it, but because the event touches a fault line within their psyche, a place where their inner world is already unstable. The more fragmented a person is, the more unstable this structure becomes. When your inner world is full of unexamined contradictions, desires you've suppressed, emotions you've repressed, and identities you've denied, you become like a brittle container. The slightest pressure from the outside world causes you to crack. Anger, then, is the signal that the container is failing to hold what's inside. At the root of fragmentation lies the fear of wholeness. It may sound paradoxical, many people are terrified of becoming psychologically whole. Wholeness requires facing everything, the noble and the shameful, the conscious and the unconscious, the light and the dark. But society teaches us to favor the light, to wear masks of perfection, kindness, confidence, discipline. This is the persona, the social face we wear to gain acceptance. But behind the persona, deep in the psyche, lies the shadow, the rejected, hidden, often frightening parts of ourselves. And the more we suppress the shadow, the more fragmented we become. A person who is easily angered is often someone at war with their own shadow. They have disowned parts of themselves they find unacceptable. Perhaps aggression, envy, pride, sexuality, or vulnerability. And they believe they have rid themselves of these traits. But traits do not disappear when denied. They simply go underground. And what the conscious mind rejects, the unconscious mind stores. Over time, this creates a split within the psyche. One part of the self believes it is good, controlled, and righteous, while the other part seethes in the darkness, waiting for a moment of weakness to surface. When a trigger arrives, when someone humiliates them, when they are criticized, ignored, or challenged, that repressed aspect erupts, often in the form of explosive anger or passive aggression. This is not a behavioral issue, it is a structural one. Fragmentation turns human beings into psychological battlegrounds. They live in contradiction, constantly pulled between what they consciously want and what they unconsciously fear. The anger they direct outward is a symptom of this inner war, but because they cannot see the battle within, they blame the external world. The mind prefers to locate problems outside of itself, because to turn inward is to risk collapsing the entire false structure it has spent a lifetime building. But this collapse is necessary. To move beyond emotional reactivity, a person must first recognize the parts of themselves they have silenced. They must confront their fears of being seen as flawed, weak, or unacceptable. This is not an intellectual task. It is a soul-level confrontation. It requires one to sit in stillness and allow the hidden voices of the self to speak. What does the repressed part of you want to say? What has it been denied for so long? Anger often masks deeper emotional truths: pain, abandonment, betrayal, inferiority, guilt. These must be brought into the light, not to be fixed, but to be acknowledged. What remains unconscious will always control you, but what is made conscious can be integrated. Integration is not the same as perfection. It does not mean eliminating the negative parts of yourself. It means giving them space within the whole. A man who acknowledges his potential for violence, for example, does not become more dangerous. He becomes more self-aware. He recognizes the shadow within and is therefore less likely to be overtaken by it. A person who owns their capacity for envy becomes more humble, more honest, and less reactive to the success of others. They no longer have to pretend. They no longer need to perform. And because they have accepted the truth of who they are no longer shaken by the judgments of the world. A fragmented self is easily offended because it lacks coherence. It cannot hold itself together under pressure. But a whole self, one that has embraced every part of its being, is a fortress. It does not need to attack or defend. It does not lash out when provoked, because it understands the provocation is irrelevant to its identity. The more unified your internal world becomes, the less chaotic the external world appears. You begin to see that people are merely projections, that insults are mirrors, and that reactions are invitations to greater awareness. The fragmented person sees life as an attack. The whole person sees it as a reflection. This shift is the beginning of true emotional liberation. To walk through life without being angered or disturbed by others requires far more than self-control or surface-level techniques. It demands a deep, and permanent transformation of the psyche, a restructuring of your relationship with your own inner world. At the core of this transformation lies shadow integration, the process of meeting the parts of yourself you have rejected, feared, or judged as unacceptable. Most people spend their lives running from their own darkness. They wear masks of politeness, rationality, and strength while hiding deeper impulses that frighten them. But the truth is simple and unsettling. What you refuse to face within yourself will rule your life from the shadows. The shadow is not evil. It is not the villain of your story. It is the set of disowned parts of your personality, qualities that at one point were deemed inappropriate, shameful, weak, or dangerous. These could be instincts like rage, lust, cruelty, selfishness, cowardice, or even confidence, ambition, or power. Anything that your environment or upbringing told you was wrong or too much got pushed into the unconscious. Over time, this suppressed material grows in intensity, taking on a life of its own. And while you try to present yourself as good and composed on the outside, the unacknowledged forces within grow stronger, influencing your behavior in ways you do not understand. When you encounter someone who irritates you, insults you, or triggers deep emotional pain, it's often because they embody a trait or attitude that belongs to your shadow. Their arrogance may remind you of the self, confidence you were never allowed to express. Their aggression may reflect a part of you that wants to fight but has been silenced. Their cruelty might mirror a harshness you carry inside, pretend isn't there. These confrontations are not random, they are invitations. Invitations to look inward and ask, what am I seeing in them that I have not yet faced in myself? This is where the path of integration begins. It is not about approval, nor is it about acting on every dark impulse. It is about honesty. It is about bringing into consciousness what was previously unconscious. It is about realizing that to be whole is to be everything, both kind and cruel, both gentle and forceful, both light and dark. Denying one half of yourself does not make you virtuous, it makes you incomplete. And incompleteness breeds reactivity. You react to others because you are not fully rooted in your own being. You become disturbed because the outer world is showing you something your inner world refuses to accept. The person who has integrated their shadow is not free from darkness. They are in relationship with it. They have looked it in the eye, listened to what it has to say, and accepted that it is part of them. In doing so, they no longer need to fear it. And when you no longer fear your own inner forces, you no longer fear them in others. You stop seeing the world as a battlefield of threats and begin to view it as a reflection of your own internal state. You stop being triggered by people's behavior because their behavior no longer activates a wound within you. This inner stability is not built overnight. Shadow integration is not a quick fix. It is a way of life. It requires sitting with discomfort, letting go of the illusion of purity, and confronting parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. It means admitting that you are capable of cruelty, rage, manipulation, jealousy, and hatred. And in that admission, you begin to free yourself. Because what is acknowledged loses its power to control you. What is denied festers in the dark and emerges in destructive ways. But what is brought into the light becomes a part of your strength. One of the most profound effects of shadow integration is the dissolution of victimhood. You stop blaming others for how you feel because you realize your reactions are not caused by them. They are revealed by them. You take responsibility for your emotional responses, not in a moralistic or judgmental way, but as a mature recognition of your own psychological structure. This gives you power, not over others, but over yourself. And this is the only real power worth having. The power to not be shaken by insult, not because you're numb, because you know exactly who you are. People who have not integrated their shadows are like volcanoes, dormant, but dangerous. All it takes is the right insult, the right humiliation, the right wound being touched, and they erupt. Their emotions are unpredictable because their unconscious is uncharted. But a person who has mapped their inner terrain becomes unshakable. They know what lives within them. They are not surprised by their own reactions because they have already met those parts in the silence of solitude. And when you know yourself at that depth, no one can use your own shadow against you. In truth, the more integrated you become, the more compassion you develop for others. You recognize that people act out their unhealed wounds. You see their projections, their shadows, their repressed pain. And instead of becoming angry or reactive, you begin to respond from a place of deep understanding. You no longer need to dominate or defend, because your identity is not built on performance. It is grounded in awareness, and that awareness is what makes you immune to the noise of others. Not through detachment, but through integration. Not through avoidance, but through total presence with everything you are. The highest form of emotional mastery is not indifference, but sovereignty. It is the capacity to remain internally undisturbed regardless of external chaos. Not because you are disconnected, but because you are deeply connected to your own center. A sovereign mind is one that no longer seeks validation, approval, or safety from the outside world. It does not collapse when insulted, nor does it inflate when praised. It is grounded whole and governed from within. This form of psychological autonomy is not given. It is earned through a long and painful process of inner liberation. Most people live in psychological dependency. Their moods are dictated by how others treat them. Their self-worth rises and falls with compliments or criticism. One negative comment can ruin their day. One betrayal can destabilize their identity. In this fragile state, the mind becomes a slave to circumstance. It is tossed from emotion to emotion like a leaf in the wind, never stable, never sovereign. What they call emotional life is often nothing more than unconscious reaction to external stimuli, and they confuse this instability for being human, when in fact it is a symptom of unclaimed inner authority. To reclaim authority over the mind, one must begin by severing the need to be seen a certain way. As long as your sense of self is dependent on how others perceive you, you will be easily controlled. If someone's disapproval can make you feel worthless, you have handed them the key to your inner world. And if someone's praise becomes your fuel, you will forever need it to feel whole. Sovereignty means stepping outside of this cycle. It means no longer allowing others to define who you are, even momentarily. It means finding within yourself a deeper source of identity that does not rise or fall with public opinion. This deeper source is not built on ego or pride. It is not a posture of superiority, but of clarity. When the mind becomes sovereign, it no longer personalizes every interaction. It sees through the masks others wear. It understands that people often speak not from truth, but from their own wounds, insecurities, and projections. Someone insults you, and instead of taking it in, you see it for what it is, a reflection of their inner condition. Someone ignores you, and instead of feeling rejected, you recognize that their behavior has nothing to do with your worth. You become immune to manipulation, not because you harden yourself, but because you see clearly. This clarity comes from the union of self-knowledge and self-trust. When you know who you are, truly, beneath all social labels, you become unshakable. Your value is no longer up for negotiation. You stop justifying your existence. You stop proving yourself. You stop reacting, because nothing needs to be defended. The sovereign mind does not seek revenge, does not argue to be right, and does not need to win approval. It is not passive, it is powerful in silence. It chooses when to act, when to speak, and when to walk away. And this choice is never dictated by ego or emotion, but by inner command. People often mistake emotional reaction for power. They believe that to fight back is strength, that to retaliate is justice. But true power does not need to announce itself. It does not tremble in the presence of insult. It simply remains. The sovereign mind does not shout, it understands. It does not rush to punish, it observes. And this observation is not cold detachment, it is warm awareness. It sees the suffering behind aggression, the fear behind control, confusion behind cruelty. And by seeing clearly, it remains free. This freedom is not the absence of emotion. It is the mastery of it. The sovereign mind feels everything, but it is not ruled by what it feels. It does not suppress emotion, it integrates it. Anger may arise, but it does not dictate action. Sadness may come, but it does not define identity. Every emotion is allowed to pass through. None are allowed to take the throne. The throne belongs to awareness, the quiet center from which all wisdom flows. This is where sovereignty lies. It is not built through dominance over others, but through presence with oneself. And when you stand in that presence, no one can provoke you, because no one holds the reins of your mind. Freedom from anger is not the suppression of emotion. but the illumination of the unconscious forces that create it. What disturbs us in others is a mirror of what we have not accepted in ourselves. As long as we remain fragmented, divided between our persona and our shadow, we will be vulnerable to every insult, rejection, or judgment. But when we face the parts of ourselves we've hidden, when we integrate our darkness instead of running from it, we stop reacting and begin responding with awareness. Mastery of the mind is not found in detachment from life, but in sovereignty over our inner world. The person who truly knows themselves cannot be shaken by the opinions or behaviors of others, because their peace is no longer conditional. It is rooted in self-knowledge, self-trust, and the quiet power of psychological wholeness.